The storm that night was unforgiving. Snow howling through the mountains, wind tearing across the frozen fields. Jack was driving home when he heard it. A faint, trembling cry carried through the storm. He stopped, stepped out into the icy darkness, and followed the sound until his flashlight caught a small shape buried in the snow. A puppy, barely breathing, its golden eyes glowing faintly against the white. Without hesitation, he wrapped it in his coat and whispered, "You're safe now." But as days turned into weeks, the creature began to change, growing faster, stronger, and eerily silent. Its gaze lingered on the woods at night, listening to things Jack couldn't hear. And when he learned what he'd truly rescued, it was already too late. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The night was merciless. Snow fell in thick sheets, blanketing the mountains in silence. Jack gripped the steering wheel of his old truck, squinting through the blinding white as wind howled against the glass. He was used to harsh winters. He'd lived alone in his cabin for years. But this storm felt different, almost alive. Then he heard it. A faint, desperate CRY.AT first. He thought it was the wind playing tricks on him. But when it came again, soft, trembling, and unmistakably real, Jack slammed the brakes. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped out into the storm, boots sinking into the frozen earth. The sound led him off the road, through the swirling snow, until his light caught a small, black shape curled beneath a tree that it was a puppy, or at least, it looked like one. Its fur was matted with ice, its body barely moving. Jack's heart clenched. "Hang on, little guy," he whispered, wrapping it in his jacket and holding it close to his chest. Back inside the cabin, by the crackling fire, the tiny creature shivered in his arms. Its golden eyes flickered open for a moment. Calm, piercing, almost human. Jack didn't know it yet, but that night, he hadn't just saved a life. He had invited something extraordinary into his own. Weeks passed, and the tiny puppy began to recover. Jack named him Shadow, a fitting name for a creature that moved as silently as smoke. But as Shadow grew, Jack noticed things that didn't feel normal. He was growing fast, too fast. What had once fit in Jack's palm now towered over his knee within a month. His paws were massive, his eyes bright gold, glinting even in the dim firelight. The local vet frowned when Jack brought him in. "He's different," she murmured, running a hand over his thick coat. "Maybe a rare hybrid. Hard to say." But she couldn't hide the unease in her voice. Home, Shadow's behavior grew stranger. He never barked. He never begged for food. Sometimes, Jack would wake in the middle of the night to find him standing by the window, staring out into the darkness, ears twitching to sounds only he could hear. One evening, as Jack sat by the fire, he noticed Shadow growling softly at the door. Jack opened it. Nothing but snow and silence. Then, far off in the woods, a faint, haunting howl rose into the night. Shadow stiffened. His head lifted, his golden eyes reflecting the firelight. That's when Jack realized the truth that sent a chill down his spine. Shadow wasn't afraid of that sound. He was answering it.by February. The cabin no longer felt the same. The silence that once brought Jack peace now carried an edge, like the forest was holding its breath. Shadow had grown into a powerful creature, far larger than any dog Jack had ever seen. His shoulders were broad, his gaze sharp, his presence commanding. And yet, something wild shimmered beneath the surface. Jack began waking up to strange things. Deep claw marks on the wooden door. Heavy footprints circling the cabin at night. Too large, too wide apart to be from a dog. The neighbors down the valley whispered about livestock disappearing, strange tracks found in the snow, eerie howls echoing through the mountains. One morning, the park ranger stopped by. "There's something out there," he said grimly. "Bigger than a wolf. Keep your doors locked." Jack nodded, but didn't mention the creature sleeping by his fireplace. That night, a storm rolled in again. The wind howled through the trees, and Shadow howled back. Jack watched from the doorway, heart racing, as Shadow's voice merged with something deeper. Older, out in the dark woods, when the echoes faded, Shadow turned his glowing eyes toward Jack, a strange calm in his gaze. And in that moment, Jack understood, whatever was out there in the forest, Shadow wasn't afraid of it. He was it, the storm returned with a vengeance. Wind screamed through the valley, and snow fell so thick that the trees vanished into white. Jack sat by the fire, trying to ignore the unease curling in his chest. Shadow paced restlessly, growling at the door. Then, without warning, he let out a deep, bone-shaking howl and lunged outside into the storm. "Shadow!" Jack shouted, grabbing his coat and flashlight. The cold hit him like a wall, but he followed the tracks through the drifts, his beam cutting through the darkness. The prints were enormous now, larger than any dog's, deeper than any wolf's. That he stumbled into a clearing and froze. Dozens of golden eyes blinked back at him from the darkness. A pack of enormous black wolves circled the edge of the forest, their bodies rippling with strength. In the center stood Shadow, taller, darker, his fur glistening under the lightning. The wolves moved around him like soldiers awaiting command. For one heartbeat, everything went still. Then Shadow turned toward Jack. His gaze was not wild, not cruel, but knowing. He stepped forward slowly, lowering his head, pressing his muzzle against Jack's hand one last time. Then, without a sound, he vanished into the storm with the others, their howls fading into the night. Jack stood there trembling, realization sinking deep. The creature he had rescued wasn't a dog at all. He had saved something ancient, powerful, and free. He hadn't found a pet. He had found a legend. The morning after the storm, the world was eerily still. The snow lay untouched, a white ocean stretching across the valley. Jack stepped outside, half hoping to see paw prints leading back to his door, but there were none. Only silence. The cabin felt emptier than ever, the absence of Shadow's steady breathing louder than any sound. A few days later, the ranger stopped by, face pale. "You might want to see this," he said, showing Jack a photo on his phone. Enormous tracks in the snow, bigger than a bear's, perfectly shaped like a wolf's, circling the outskirts of the town. "Whatever it is," the ranger whispered, "it's not normal." Jack said nothing. That night, he set a bowl of food outside his cabin door, just like he used to. In the morning, it was gone. No prints, no trace, only the faintest impression in the snow, as if something massive had stood there and watched him. Weeks passed. Some nights, when the moon was full, a single deep howl echoed through the forest, long, mournful, and familiar. The townsfolk called it the ghost wolf, a creature that protected the valley from unseen dangers. But Jack knew the truth. He didn't need to see it to know. Shadow was still out there, watching, guarding, just as he always had. Spring finally came to the mountains. The snow melted, revealing patches of green that glimmered beneath the morning sun. Life returned to the forest, but Jack still found himself glancing toward the tree line, half expecting to see a familiar golden gaze staring back. One afternoon, while repairing a fence near the clearing where he had last seen Shadow, something caught his eye, a patch of dark fur tangled in the brush. He knelt, gently pulling it free. The fur shimmered faintly, black with a hint of silver, like it held pieces of the night itself. Nearby, buried halfway in the dirt, was an old animal skull. Jack stared at it for a long moment, then smiled softly. "You weren't a monster," he whispered. "You were a guardian." As he turned to leave, a deep, echoing howl rolled through the valley. Low, powerful, and hauntingly familiar. It wasn't close, but it wasn't far either. Jack paused, eyes misting. "Goodbye, buddy," he said quietly. The wind carried the sound of another faint howl in reply, fading into the forest. And in that moment, Jack finally understood. Some bonds don't end with distance or time. They simply live on, hidden between the echoes of the wild.